The sensation of cold steel biting into his wrists was shocking, but it was the silence of the dashboard clock that truly terrified him. It read 11:48 p.m. Dr. Marcus Sterling knew with the precise mathematical certainty of a cardiothoracic surgeon that the woman lying on an operating table 15 miles away had exactly 12 minutes before her aorta ruptured completely. But Marcus wasn't in the operating room. He was pressed face first against the wet, freezing metal of his own hood, rain soaking through his thin scrubs, while a flashlight beam danced mockingly over his head. He tried to speak, to explain that he was the only man in the state capable of saving the patient waiting for him. But the officer behind him just tightened the cuffs, leaning close enough for Marcus to smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You people always have an excuse," the officer sneered, his voice dripping with a casual, terrifying arrogance. "But tonight, you're going to learn that a fancy car doesn't make you above the law." Marcus closed his eyes, the rain mixing with the sweat on his face, realizing with a sick, sinking feeling that the officer wasn't just arresting a speeder. He was unknowingly sentencing a woman to death, and he was enjoying every second of it. Only 2 hours earlier, Dr. Marcus Sterling had been a god in the sterile world of Mercy General Hospital. As the chief of cardiovascular surgery, he walked the halls with an aura of quiet command, his hands insured for millions, his reputation built on saving the cases that other doctors deemed hopeless. He was a man of science and precision, someone who had fought his way up from the bottom to become a legend in his field. But the world outside the hospital walls operated on a different set of rules. Rules that didn't care about his Ivy League degree or the lives he had saved. To the world outside, stripped of his white coat and standing in the dark, he was just a black man in a luxury vehicle, a target for suspicion rather than respect. He had spent his entire life navigating this duality, keeping his hands visible, speaking calmly, and shrinking himself to survive. But tonight, the stakes were higher than his own dignity. The evening had started as a rare sanctuary of peace. Marcus was home in his quiet suburban neighborhood, the smell of his wife's rosemary chicken filling the kitchen, while he helped his 7-year-old daughter, Leo, with a science project about the solar system. It was the kind of domestic bliss he rarely got to enjoy, a warm bubble shielding him from the life-and-death stakes of his job. He was gluing a plastic ring onto Saturn, laughing as Leo explained gravity when the phone rang. It was the red line, the emergency bypass tone that only rang for catastrophic cases. The ER director's voice was trembling on the other end. A 54-year-old woman, a VIP admission, had just arrived with a type A aortic dissection. Her heart was essentially tearing itself apart. The on-call surgeon was stuck in trauma. Marcus was the only one with the skill set to repair the tear before she bled out internally. "She has 40 minutes, Marcus," the director had said. "Maybe less." The transformation was instant. The father vanished, and the surgeon took over. He kissed his family goodbye, promising to return before breakfast, and grabbed his pre-packed surgical go-bag. As he merged onto the interstate, the rain began to fall, a torrential, freezing downpour that turned the asphalt into a black mirror. Marcus pushed his silver BMW to 80 miles per hour on the empty stretch of highway. He wasn't driving recklessly. His hands were steady, his eyes scanning the road, his mind already visualizing the incision, the clamp, the suture. He calculated the distance, 18 minutes to the hospital doors. He had time. He could save her. But then, the darkness of the rearview mirror was shattered by a burst of red and blue strobes. His heart didn't race with guilt. It sank with dread. He checked the clock. Pulling over would cost him 3 minutes. Explaining the emergency would take 2. He could still make it, barely. He signaled, slowed down, and pulled onto the shoulder, praying that the officer walking toward his window would be a man of reason. He had no idea he was about to meet Officer Hoyt. The window hummed down, letting in the roar of the highway and the biting wind, but the officer didn't approach the window immediately. He stood back, shining his high-beam flashlight directly into Marcus's eyes, blinding him, a power move designed to disorient. "Engine off! Keys on the dash!" the voice barked from the darkness. Marcus complied slowly, placing his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, making sure his movements were deliberate and non-threatening. "Officer," Marcus began, his voice calm but urgent, "I am Dr. Marcus Sterling, a trauma surgeon at Mercy General. I am responding to a critical life-and-death emergency. I was speeding, and I accept the ticket, but I need to get to the hospital immediately." Officer Hoyt finally stepped into the light. He was a heavy-set man with eyes that looked devoid of empathy. He leaned in, ignoring the hospital ID hanging from the rearview mirror, and looked around the leather interior with a sneer of disgust. "Dr. Sterling, huh?" Hoyt laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "That's a nice story. And I'm the intense tooth fairy. Who's the car registered to? And don't lie to me, boy." The slur hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "It is my car, officer. My registration is in the glove box. May I reach for it?" The situation began to spiral into a nightmare when Marcus's phone, sitting on the passenger seat, lit up with a call from the ER. The screen flashed urgent. "Don't touch it!" Hoyt screamed, his hand dropping to his holster as if Marcus had reached for a weapon. "Step out of the vehicle, now!" Marcus tried to plead. "Officer, that is the hospital calling. A woman is dying. Please, just look at my credentials." But Hoyt wasn't listening. He was escalating. He yanked the door open and dragged Marcus out by his arm, spinning him around and slamming him against the car. The handcuffs clicked tight, pinching the skin. "You're under arrest for reckless driving and failure to comply," Hoyt spat. He patted Marcus down aggressively, his hands rough and invading, checking for drugs, for weapons, for anything that would justify his prejudice. The rain was soaking through Marcus's scrubs, chilling him to the bone, but the cold was nothing compared to the fire of helplessness burning in his chest. He watched the clock on the dashboard through the window. 11:55 p.m. The patient was losing ground. Every beat of her heart was a ticking time bomb, and this officer was wasting time simply because he could. What followed was a slow, agonizing desecration of Marcus's dignity and his profession. Hoyt didn't put Marcus in the car. He left him standing in the rain while he began a search of the vehicle. He opened the trunk and found the surgical go-bag. Any reasonable person would see the sterile kits, the expensive loupes, the stethoscope, and realize the truth. Hoyt saw them as props. He unzipped a sterile pack of scalpels, ripping the plastic open and tossing the expensive life-saving tools onto the muddy shoulder of the highway. "Fancy knives," Hoyt muttered, kicking a clamp with his boot. "What do you use these for, cutting up drugs?" He found a protein bar in the side pocket, Marcus's emergency ration for long surgeries. Hoyt tore it open, took a slow, deliberate bite, and chewed it while staring Marcus in the eye, a grotesque display of dominance. "Whole Foods," Hoyt mumbled with his mouth full. "You people certainly spend your money well." Marcus watched his sterile instruments sinking into the mud, instruments he needed to save a life. His phone buzzed again, a text message popping up on the screen inside the car. "BP dropping. She's crashing. ETA?" Marcus shouted over the rain. "Officer, look at the phone. She is crashing. You are killing her." Hoyt didn't even look up. He just smirked and tossed the wrapper on the ground. "She can wait. I'm not done with you yet." The dashboard clock flickered to 12:05 a.m. Hope was almost gone. Marcus had stopped fighting. He was standing with his head bowed, mourning a woman he hadn't even met yet, defeated by the sheer wall of ignorance in front of him. But then, The sound of a siren cut through the storm, not a patrol car, but the high-pitched wail of a command vehicle. A black SUV tore down the shoulder, tires spraying gravel, and screeched to a halt inches from Hoyt's patrol car. Captain Reynolds burst out of the driver's seat. He was a man known for his iron composure, a decorated leader of the force. But tonight his face was pale, his eyes wild with terror. He had been tracking the surgeon's phone through the dispatch center because the dying woman, the patient whose aorta was tearing apart, was his wife, Sarah. He saw the scene through the windshield, the scattered medical supplies, the surgeon in handcuffs, and his own officer leaning casually against the car, eating a snack. "Where is he?" Reynolds roared, his voice cracking with emotion. "Where is the surgeon?" Officer Hoyt straightened up, confused, wiping crumbs from his mouth. "Captain, I got a speeder here. Claims to be a doctor. Likely stolen vehicle, resisting our—" Reynolds didn't let him finish. He shoved Hoyt aside with a force that sent the heavy officer stumbling into the mud. Reynolds scrambled to the medical bag, seeing the name Dr. M. Sterling embroidered on the muddy canvas. He looked at Marcus, the man he needed more than air, the man who held his wife's life in his hands, standing handcuffed like a common criminal. The realization hit Reynolds like a physical blow. His face drained of all color, his knees buckling slightly as the horror of what his subordinate had done washed over him. He looked from the ID badge to Marcus, his eyes filling with tears. "Oh my God," Reynolds whispered, his voice trembling. "You stopped him. You stopped him while Sarah is dying." The switch was instantaneous. Reynolds didn't wait for keys. He pulled a multi-tool from his belt and snapped the handcuffs off Marcus's wrists, not caring if he cut the doctor's skin. "Doctor, I am so sorry," Reynolds gasped, grabbing Marcus by the shoulders. "That is my wife. Sarah is my wife." Hoyt tried to intervene. "Captain, he was doing 80. I followed protocol." Reynolds spun around, his face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "You are relieved of duty!" he screamed, the sound echoing over the highway. "Give me your badge and your gun! Now! You stay here and pray she lives!" Reynolds turned back to Marcus. "Take my car. It has the lights. Go!" Marcus didn't waste a second on anger. He rubbed his wrists, grabbed what was left of his bag, and jumped into the captain's SUV. As he floored the accelerator, the engine roaring to life, Reynolds radioed ahead. "All units, clear the route to Mercy General, Code 3. Medical transport, do not stop him. I repeat, do not stop him." The highway became a blur of lights as Marcus raced against the Reaper, the captain's plea echoing in his ears. The surgery was a war zone. When Marcus burst into the OR, Sarah Reynolds had already flatlined once. The delay on the highway meant the tear in her aorta had extended, turning a difficult repair into a near-impossible one. Marcus worked for 7 hours straight, his wrists throbbing where the handcuffs had been, his mind locking into a state of hyper-focus. He didn't think about the rain or the officer. He thought about the tissue, the blood flow, the stitch. He fought for every inch of ground, repairing the vessel with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. When he finally stepped back, peeling off his blood-soaked gloves, the heart monitor was beeping, a steady rhythmic sound of life. He walked out into the waiting room as the sun was rising, exhausted, still wearing the mud-stained shoes from the highway. Captain Reynolds was standing there, looking like he had aged 10 years in one night. When Marcus nodded, just a small, tired nod, the captain collapsed into a chair and wept. The aftermath was swift and absolute. The dashcam footage, combined with the captain's testimony, painted a damning picture. Officer Hoyt wasn't just fired. He was indicted on federal civil rights charges and reckless endangerment. The image of the sterile scalpels lying in the mud became a symbol of the rot within the department, sparking protests and a complete overhaul of traffic stop protocols. But the real closure came 3 weeks later. Marcus walked into a private room at Mercy General. Sarah Reynolds was sitting up, pale but smiling. She didn't know the full story of the delay, only that her husband regarded Dr. Sterling as a saint. Captain Reynolds stood by the window. He couldn't look Marcus in the eye at first. The shame was too deep. But then he walked over and extended a hand. "You saved her," Reynolds said, his voice thick. "After everything my uniform did to you, you saved her." Marcus shook the captain's hand, feeling the weight of the moment. He realized that hate is easy. Hate is lazy. It takes no effort to judge, to dismiss, to destroy. But to save? To heal? That takes a strength that prejudice can never understand. As he walked back to his car that evening, the same silver BMW, he paused to look at the sunset reflecting off the hospital glass. He had almost lost everything on the side of that road, his freedom, his dignity, and his patient, but he hadn't broken. He had proven that excellence is the ultimate shield, and that while a badge gives you authority, only humanity gives you power. The siren that night hadn't been the sound of his defeat. It was the alarm clock waking the world up to a truth it could no longer ignore.